All right, so we're making good progress here. So we just took care of step 2 where we pre-populated the form. Now we're going to move into step 3 of updating the student controller servlet. So we're going to write code to handle the request to actually update a student. So let's go ahead and jump into Eclipse. The first thing here is updating our student controller servlet. But I want to take a look at that JSP page, our update student form.jsp, because there's some good information in here that can guide us for our next set of coding here. So this is update student, and this is the file that we just worked on in the previous video. On lines 23 and 25, we actually have 2 hidden fields. So we have command equals update, and then we have student ID, and we give the student.id. So these are 2 params that we're sending over to the servlet. Our servlet now needs to read that information and process on it accordingly. So let me go ahead and open up my student controller servlet. I'll expand the window here, move down a bit to our doGet method. So this is what we read in the command. And we need to add support for the update command. So basically that's just a matter of adding a new case here. So we saw the previous example of case of load. Now we'll do a case of update. So I'll say case update. And for this case, I want to update student, pass in a request and a response, and then do a break. All right, so that's the basic layout. But again, Eclipse has a little error message here that's saying update student. And if we hover over this message, it'll give us the actual error. So it says, hey, this method is not defined. And again, Eclipse is our buddy, right? So we simply say, hey, Eclipse, go ahead and create this method for me. Woohoo! Just love it when Eclipse creates code for us. So here's our update student that they created. It's stubbed out right now. And what I want to do here is go ahead and start writing some code in this method. So the first thing I know I'm going to need to do is actually throw an exception. So here I'll just say throws exception. And I'll just lay this out first, just in case there are any errors, we can handle for it accordingly, or actually throw the exception to the calling program. Now, I always like to go through and set up comments here just to kind of keep me on track as far as the code that I need to write. And the first thing I need to do is read the student info from the form data. And then I need to create a new student object based on that form data. And then I actually perform the update on the database. And then finally, I'll send the user back to the list students page. So that's my basic game plan here for the update student method. All right, so let me roll my sleeves up here and get dirty and start writing some code. So for reading the student ID from the form, I'll read in the actual ID. So I'll say integer.parseInt. I'll say request.getParameter, student ID, and that's that hidden form field that came in from the update form. And then I'll go through and read all the standard information. Read the first name by saying request.getParameter, first name. When we've seen this stuff before, and I'll just kind of copy paste this line for last name and email address. So I'll update it here for last name. And I'll also update it here for email address. All right, cool. So that's the basic work there for reading the student info from the form data. So now we have everything for a student, and I can use that down here on line 91 to actually create a new student object. So here I'll say student, the student equals new student, and I just pass in those parameters. So ID, first name, last name, and email address. All right, that's good. Then using this information, I'll actually perform an update on the database. So I'll make use of my student DB util, and I'll say update student, and then I'll pass in my student object, the student. And then finally, I'll send them back to the list students page. So list students request response. And that's that same method that we created many moons ago. And we'll simply list all the students. But again, there's an error message here. So on line 94, Eclipse says that it can't find the method update student. And again, I'll say, hey, Eclipse, well, why don't you help me out? Why don't you go ahead and create that method for me in that student DB util? So I'll select the option, and now I'm in student DB util.java, and here's this new method that Eclipse just created for me. So for now, I'll say do nothing. I'll get into the details for it later, but at least I want to have this method defined here in this class, just so the code will compile for my actual servlet. So if I move back to my servlet, then that error message goes away. So we're in pretty good shape. So this is all the coding here required for actually doing the update student. So we read the student info, create a new student object, perform an update on the database, and then send them back to the list students page. In the next video, we'll actually drill down into line 94 and we'll actually do the Jdbc code for updating the student. And I'll cover that in the next video. So I'll see you soon.